Across the galaxy, there have been many worlds central to the development of society as we know it. Coruscant, the heart of the Republic, immediately comes to mind, as do Ossus and Korriban, the birthplaces of the Jedi and Sith orders. Many others, like Alsaken and Corellia, made their own indelible marks on history. In most cases, however, planets with significantly smaller contributions to the Republic's history were lesser known and less important in the grand scheme of things. But not all cases. Some planets held deep meaning, crucial in their own right. Without them, the shape of the galaxy would be very different even if they weren't Coruscant or Corellia. In today's video, we'll be talking about just one such world, Ilum, and the many ways it was important to the galaxy.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Located in the Ilum system of the unknown regions, Ilum was a tiny iceball of a planet similar to Hoth. Its surface mainly consisted of vast snow fields, rocky frozen peaks, and crystallized glaciers. Frost-resistant trees formed the occasional forest, but for the most part, the planet's fauna was left to fend for itself in the open snow and ice. The only real source of warmth came in the form of underground geysers that expelled hot water into the planet's caverns. This geothermal activity was caused by volcanoes that never seemed to erupt. It had 2 moons and was the 5th planet in its system, orbiting the blue dwarf sun Assar. But that wasn't why it was such a contested world. The real reason Ilum was important was its kyber crystalline core and, as by extension, the vast amount of kyber crystals. In many caverns on Ilum, glowing formations of kyber crystals could be found and mined. As we're sure you all know, kyber crystals were force-attuned living crystals that could channel energy. They were used by the Jedi to construct their lightsabers for tens of thousands of years, but their uses didn't stop there. Kyber crystals could be used as power sources and amplifiers, so over the millennia, the various iterations of the Sith Empire sought to use them as well. Darth Sidious would be no exception to this pattern. After the fall of the Galactic Republic, the Empire gathered kyber crystals to power the Death Star's powerful laser. But more on that later. Long before people dreamed of powerful battle stations that could destroy planets in one single hit, there were the Jedi. When kyber crystals became the standard power source in their sabers, Ilum became a sacred place for the Order. This was typical for the Jedi. When a location had an abundance of kyber crystals, they tended to erect Jedi temples or academies nearby. Such had been the case with Tatooine, where a Jedi enclave had been built near the Dantian caves, which also contained kyber crystals. Ilum wasn't an exception. In no time after its crystal surplus was discovered, a Jedi temple was built, and the crystal-rich caverns were converted into a sacred Jedi place, the Crystal Caves. We're sure you all remember the Clone Wars episode The Gathering. In it, a group of Padawan, supervised by Master Yoda, are taken to Ilum in order to gather their first lightsaber crystal. To the Jedi, this was an age-old ritual. It was a task much more daunting than simply walking into a cave and picking a crystal. It was a trial designed to make or break a Padawan's resolve and prove whether they were truly ready to become a Jedi. As shown in The Gathering and Jedi Fallen Order, the way the crystal caves were set up was deliberate. The doors were always sheathed in a thick layer of ice that prevented anyone from entering or leaving. At the entrance to the caverns, a temple had been erected, and in this small antechamber, the Jedi had put together a mechanism to thaw the ice. Glass or crystal prisms were positioned so that, when the sunlight struck them, they would amplify the light and focus it on the ice, melting it and clearing the path for prospective Padawan to enter. Of course, the sun wouldn't remain in place for long. Padawan hoping to enter the caves and gather their crystals were on a time limit, and if they waited too long, they would be trapped within. That's the official Jedi line, at least. We're pretty sure the Order of Compassionate Warrior Monks wouldn't really leave a tween stuck inside forever, but the threat was a great way of making Padawan feel a sense of urgency. Once they'd entered the caves, the Padawan were on their own. It was far more than just grabbing the shiniest or prettiest crystal. Remember that kyber crystals were living crystals connected to the Force. Padawan weren't to just pick a crystal, but the crystal. One that spoke to them through the Force and resonated with them. Once they were in the caverns, it was their task to open themselves up to the Force and find their crystal. The caves, however, didn't make this easy. With such a high concentration of Force-attuned crystals, the very crystal caves themselves were rich in the Force. Entering them wasn't the same as walking into any other cave. Once inside, Padawan were tested by the Force itself. Thoughts that sounded very much like their own whispered doubts into their heads that would chip away at their resolve. Visions would appear, designed to trigger their worst fears. In short, the caves would expose the Jedi's weaknesses and force them to confront them. If they were successful, they would be guided to find their crystal. If not, some sources state they would be lost. Again, given how benevolent the Jedi Order was, our money's on them being rescued and given counseling to overcome their weaknesses, and if that failed again, they'd be moved to the Service Corps or other Jedi-adjacent services. But the trial of gathering was truly the first test a young Jedi would face. Given that, once they obtained their sabers, they would go out into the galaxy and be tested by the real world. It was an important step in winnowing out those who weren't ready for the challenges ahead. Unfortunately for the Jedi, external forces didn't let them have their sacred gathering grounds uncontested. The story starts peacefully enough. Soon after the formation of the Jedi Order, a scout navigated through hyperspace with the guidance of the Force, only to land upon the veritable Force beacon that was Ilum. The Order swarmed the planet, establishing a hyperspace route to it, surveying its landscape, pinpointing where crystals could be found, and generally securing this treasure trove. Initially, they built a Jedi temple there, but eventually abandoned the planet entirely. Mentions of Ilum were erased from star maps, and only those who needed to know remained in the know. Younglings were still sent there to gather their crystals, but it was no longer a Jedi base. For millennia, the balance remained. Jedi would go to the planet to gather crystals, but that was it. That was until Order 66. After it was initially carried out, troopers of the 481st Legion were sent to Ilum to hunt down any Jedi that may have fled to it for shelter. By 18 BBY, the Empire was on Ilum, though what they did there varied depending on continuity. In Legends, Ilum was largely forgotten. Initially, it was used as a refuge by Jedi fleeing the Purge, but the Empire soon took over the planet and killed the Jedi hiding there. They maintained a small garrison on Ilum afterwards, sealing off the crystal caves and guarding them against any Jedi fugitives that might try to enter. Nonetheless, the garrison there was small and chronically undersupplied, with a posting on Ilum being more of a punishment than anything. In canon though, the Empire established more extensive facilities on Ilum, and they weren't shy in exploiting its resources. Immediately, they settled its surface and began strip mining it for kyber crystals. They destroyed the Jedi Temple leading to the crystal caves, making access easier for their mining operations. However, they mined too greedily and too deep. Those volcanoes we mentioned in the beginning had been dormant, but now magma began bubbling its way up to the surface. They even dug an entire mining ship into its surface in an effort to get as much out of it as they could, leaving huge trench scarring on its surface that was visible from orbit. As a result of this overmining, Ilum's presence in the Force slowly diminished the more the Force-attuned crystals were stripped clean. The planet became barren and polluted. In many ways, it was a sad testament to how brutally the Empire would tear anything in its way down. But because no sentience lived on its surface, its loss was a silent one. After the Battle of Jakku between the Galactic Empire and the newly established New Republic, a handful of high-ranking officers and personnel escaped into the unknown regions to form the First Order. Its first order was establishing the Starkiller Project, which was based on Ilum. For 30 years, they continued mining down to Ilum's core for a very specific reason. They turned the Imperial Trench the Empire had established into a superweapon, with the planet's very core the power array. Ilum had become a living Death Star. In 34 ABY, they used their new superweapon to destroy the Hosnian system. The Hosnian Cataclysm, as it became known, was a devastatingly destabilizing blow to the New Republic. The Resistance managed to find its location, however, and launched an attack on the base that saw the superweapon destroyed. Sadly, Ilum went with it. When the Kyber core exploded, so too did the planet. All that energy collapsed inwards, taking with it millennia of history and tradition. Ilum imploded in a burst of fire and ice, shining brightly with the force of a newly born star before being extinguished for the last time. Well, at least it survived intact in legends. Ilum was just another story of how the Empire ruined everything. It, at least, saw no sentient casualties. But which other worlds that were devastated by the Empire would you like to hear about? Let us know all that and more in the comments section below, and as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.